The server removed the sixth untouched wine glass with the kind of gentle pity usually reserved for funerals. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The message had already settled like dust on the white linen tablecloth. They're not coming. I stared at the half-melted candle in the middle of the table, trying to remember which of my kids used to blow those out when they were small. Probably Jack, or maybe Eliza. She'd always made a show of it, eyes squinted, cheeks puffed, like she was summoning a hurricane. That was before birthdays got quieter, before my wife stopped baking cakes and started recommending restaurants, before dinner invites turned into calendar links and, "I'll check with my assistant. Table for 7. That's what I'd said when I called the reservation in 2 weeks ago. No need for menus. I had already placed the order. Spaghetti for Eliza, veal for my brother, Caesar with no anchovies for my wife. Everyone's favorites. I even brought the old Nikon, the one we used for family photos before phones replaced memories. I had it recharged, cleaned, stupidly optimistic. 6 p.m. turned into 6:20, then 6:35. By 6:50, I started telling myself stories. Maybe the traffic was bad. Maybe they were coming from one car. Maybe they'd walk in together, smiling, apologetic, arms full of balloons or a dumb cake that said, "Still kicking." The stories dried up by 7:15. My fork scraped against the bottom of the risotto bowl. The waiter hesitated by the bar, stealing glances. Maybe he thought I was stood up by a Tinder date. That would have been less humiliating, less surgical. I smiled at him, tight, practiced, dead in the eyes, and waved off the rest of the untouched courses. 5 entrees, 5 untouched drinks, 5 empty chairs. My son, my daughter, my wife, my brother, my best friend, that's 5. Add me and her father, that made 7. Correction, would have made 7. And then, right as I was about to stand, to leave the untouched tiramisu like a gravestone for the evening, the waiter returned. No tray, no bill, just a folded napkin. He placed it beside the glass I hadn't lifted all night and said softly, "Someone asked me to give you this when you were done." Inside, one line, handwritten, "Check your phone." I felt it in my gut before I reached for it. That burn behind your ribs when you know the truth is right on the other side of a tap. I opened the screen, thumb shaking, not from age, not tonight. A single message at the top. My father-in-law, time-stamped 30 minutes ago. He hadn't called in months. And right then, if you're hearing this, really hearing this, don't scroll past like nothing happened. Over 97% of you listening right now never hit subscribe. But this story? It only got darker from here. If you want us to keep going, keep digging. Press that button. It means more than you think. For me, for the team behind this, for the men out there who've been where I was, left at an empty table by the people they raised. Now back to the message. It was a forwarded thread, a screenshot of a group chat I didn't know existed. My wife, my brother, my 2 kids, my best friend. That was 5 again. "Let's just do something next weekend. Not tonight. He'll survive. Don't want to sit through his poor me stories again. He'll probably cry into his wine." But it was the last line that landed, like a punch to the throat you didn't see coming. My wife. "Just ghost it. He'll get the hint." I sat back in my chair and looked around. One last time. The table was clean now, all but my glass, the candle stub, and the folded napkin. That was the moment something left me. Not rage, not sorrow, something colder, something sharper. It felt a lot like clarity. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from a quiet room. It comes from knowing the people you love most think you're disposable. That was the silence I sat in while my thumb hovered over the screen, the restaurant around me blurring into wallpaper. I wasn't even reading the messages at first, just scanning, like my brain refused to believe what my eyes were telling it. The thread came from my father-in-law, George, old school, buttoned up, and never a fan of gossip. He didn't even own a smartphone until last year, still sends emails like he's afraid the NSA reads them. For him to screenshot something, let alone send it to me, that meant one thing. He wanted me to see this. The group chat was titled Fam and Co. Cute, harmless, except I wasn't in it. Message 1 was from Eliza, my daughter. "Let's just do something next weekend, not tonight. It's not like he expects all of us." Jack, my son, followed. "I've got class early. I'll call him tomorrow." Then my brother Tim. "Do we really need to do the whole wine glass toast thing again? The when I was your age monologue? Hard pass." Then Ben, my best friend. More like ex-best friend now, I guess. "Ugh, he'll probably cry into his wine like last year." And finally, my wife, my partner of 31 years, the mother of my children, the woman who once cried beside me in a hospital parking lot when we lost our first pregnancy. She wrote, "Just ghost it. He'll get the hint. I got the hint. I got it like a knife between the ribs. And what struck me hardest wasn't the cruelty. It was the orchestration, the ease, the lack of hesitation. No one even said, hey, maybe we should show up anyway. Not one dissent, not one person with a spine. For years, I blamed myself for the distance. I thought maybe I talked too much about work or got too sentimental after a glass of wine. I'd excuse the eye rolls from Jack, the rushed hugs from Eliza. I figured it was generational. Kids get busy, spouses get tired, friends grow apart. But reading those texts was like discovering they hadn't drifted from me. They deliberately docked somewhere else and cut the line behind them. I sat back in that chair and felt something fossilize in my chest. Grief? No, that had passed somewhere between message 3 and 4. This was different. This was resolve. I wasn't going to reply. I wasn't going to call. I wasn't even going to text George and say thank you. Not yet. Because something in my gut said there was more. And I don't mean more messages. I mean something deeper. This wasn't just a dinner skip. This wasn't about me being boring or sentimental. There was something coordinated in all of it. The timing, the complete absence, the fact that no one even pretended to have a reason. You don't orchestrate that kind of silence unless you're trying to smother something, hide something, maybe someone. I looked back at that waiter, now wiping down a nearby table, and I realized I didn't feel humiliated anymore. I felt curious, and curiosity for a man like me, quiet, methodical, slow to anger, is the first domino in a very different chain. I paid the bill in cash, told the waiter to keep the change, walked out with my jacket folded over one arm and a knot behind my ribs that wasn't going to untie itself. By the time I stepped into my car, I'd already replayed every odd moment from the last year. The missed calls, the turned down trips, the new passwords on shared accounts, the weekends she'd claimed to visit her sister, but come back with tan lines in winter. A phrase came back to me then, one I hadn't heard in decades. My old boss, back when I was a junior analyst, used to say it after every quiet quarter. If nothing's wrong, why is everyone so quiet? That's when I knew. This wasn't going to be about birthday dinners anymore. It was going to be about answers. And when I found them, there'd be no second table. I sat in the driveway with the engine running, headlights bouncing off the garage door like they were waiting for permission to see inside. But I didn't go in. I didn't want to hear the silence of that house, the kind where no one waits up, where the birthday banner never got hung, where the leftover frosting was probably already in the trash. I scrolled back to the last message from George, my father-in-law, the one who'd forwarded me the group chat that lit the match. I hadn't responded, hadn't needed to. Some messages don't need answers. They're the answer. The phone buzzed in my hand. Incoming call. George. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to pick up, not out of anger, just fatigue, like I couldn't handle one more person explaining away the knife in my back as a misunderstanding. But something about George, he wasn't like the rest of them. Always distant, sure, but not unkind, not manipulative. I answered. He didn't start with pleasantries, didn't even say hello. He said, I wasn't invited either. I didn't respond. I'm sorry, son. Still, I said nothing. There was a long pause, long enough for the Bluetooth to start asking if I wanted to hang up. Then his voice cracked and something in it sounded older than usual. There's something you need to know, he said. I should have said it long ago. That phrase, should have said it. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. It wasn't about dinner. It wasn't about group chats. This wasn't a guilt apology. This was a confession. I don't know the whole story, he continued, but 3 years ago, your wife, she opened an account, a joint one, with a man named Scott Weller. The name landed heavy, not like a hammer, more like a safe dropped from just high enough to crack the foundation, because I knew that name, barely, vaguely, one of those ghosts that flickered in the background of our life, a name I heard once, maybe twice. Someone she used to collaborate with on some consulting gig that never made it past cocktail talk. I asked about him once and she'd waved it off. Just someone I did some work with years ago. He's irrelevant now. Apparently not that irrelevant. I thought it was for business, George said, quieter now. She told me it was, that you knew, but the way she avoided talking about it, and when I asked again last Christmas, she snapped at me, told me to stay out of it, that it was handled. Why tell me now? I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded steadier, detached, like I'd already stepped outside my own skin. Because, he sighed, when I saw those messages tonight, how they all just abandoned you, I realized something. If they can ghost you, they can lie to me. And if she's lied about that account, I don't want to be the man who kept quiet and watched his son-in-law get gutted in silence. Silence again. I stared at the faint outline of our bedroom window, still dark. No movement inside, no shadows, no hint that anyone had noticed I'd been gone for over 3 hours on what was supposed to be my birthday dinner. "How much money?" I asked. "I don't know, but she started the account right after your mother passed, didn't she?" I froze. That was the year we liquidated part of the estate, my inheritance, roughly $240,000 after taxes and probate. I remember she handled the transfers, said she'd found a smarter savings vehicle, said her friend's husband worked in boutique finance and could make it grow better than our local credit union. I didn't question her. I'd been grieving, distracted. I let her handle it because that's what we did, divide and conquer. I laughed, just once, a dry, dead thing that died on my lips before it even reached the air vents. "I'm sorry, Robert," George said again. "I thought it was your idea. If I'd known—" "You didn't, and neither did I." And just like that, the grief I'd been wading through was gone, replaced with something colder, something more useful. I hung up, didn't say goodbye. I sat in that car for another 10 minutes, staring at the house that now felt less like home and more like a crime scene. Scott Weller, hidden accounts, my own children complicit, whether they knew it or not. Every memory from the past 3 years started reordering itself in my head like a file drawer knocked loose. Her mood swings, her sudden interest in personal space, the closed-door Zoom calls, her snapping at me for touching the mail, the missing savings, the new shoes she claimed were on sale, the out-of-town weekends that never showed up on hotel reward statements. She hadn't just ghosted my birthday, she'd been slowly ghosting me, and I'd finally stopped pretending not to notice. The next morning, I didn't pour coffee, didn't shave, didn't even open the bedroom door. I heard her moving around up there, light steps, closet drawers, the casual shuffle of someone completely unbothered by what she did last night. There was no guilt in her gait, no panic, just the easy confidence of someone who believes her sins have no witnesses. But now, she did. I slipped out the back, drove east. 45 minutes later, I pulled into a cul-de-sac lined with identical beige houses, each with an American flag or a security sign stabbed into the front lawn like they were guarding something worth stealing. I rang the doorbell twice. Curtis opened the door wearing pajama pants, a ratty Notre Dame t-shirt, and an expression that said he thought I was dead or worse, selling him something. Curtis and I went back 30 years. He was an internal auditor before he retired, the guy banks hired when they were afraid someone was laundering money under their noses. He didn't do the type of work you brag about at parties. He was the guy you called when you didn't want to make noise. He blinked at me. "Jesus, Rob, you look like hell." "Let's find out why," I said. We didn't talk much while the coffee brewed. He brought out the good laptop, his dirty machine, he called it. No email, no cloud sync, just raw tools and archives. I gave him the name, Scott Weller, then the approximate year. Start around early 2020. That's when she got cagey about finances. He nodded, already pulling up a handful of quiet access search tools, the kind that scrape financial metadata without leaving footprints. 5 minutes later, we had a hit. A small regional investment firm in Vermont, boutique, niche, shell firm adjacent. It sounded like the kind of place that would pitch itself as a wealth haven for forward thinkers. Curtis looked at me over his glasses. "She ever mentioned Horizon Asset Trust?" "Not once." He clicked deeper. "Well, she should have. That's where your money's been doing cartwheels." He tilted the screen toward me. There it was. Joint account. Primary holder, Joanne Pierce Weller. Co-owner, Scott Weller. I stared at the hyphenated name. "She took his name?" He squinted. "No. Looks like she used her maiden name to open the account. Legally, it's not fraud since it's hers, but shady? Absolutely." I asked the question like I already knew the answer. "Where did the money come from?" Curtis scrolled through transactions, leaning in. "See here? All those transfers labeled investment contribution? That's your joint savings account. Looks like they set up small recurring draws. Nothing flashy, nothing that would trip a threshold." "How much?" He exhaled. "Over 180,000. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Just let the number sit there in the room, like a third person. "And this guy, Scott, he's still listed as co-owner," Curtis added, "which means he can move the money at will." I closed my eyes for a second. Just one. When I opened them, it wasn't rage I felt, it was precision. Because now I had a name, a number, a timeline, and a motive. The pieces weren't scattered anymore. They were forming a pattern. I remembered a night 6 months ago, Joanne in bed, phone glowing in her hand, screen tilted away from me. She'd laughed. Not the polite laugh you give coworkers or baristas. No, this was the laugh she used to save for me. Something electric. Private. I asked, "Who's that?" She'd said, "Just a meme from Eliza." She turned the screen away when she said it. Later, I'd seen a name flash on the lock screen before she swiped it away. Scott W. I hadn't asked again. I'd told myself stories, comforting ones, harmless ones, stupid ones, but Curtis had just burned those to ash. "She's laundering money through her boyfriend," Curtis said flatly. "Plain and simple." "Ex-boyfriend," I corrected. He raised an eyebrow. "She just doesn't know it yet." Curtis gave a dry laugh. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. "Not yet." Because the thing about betrayal is, once you see the frame, you start noticing every brushstroke. The way she pushed me to let her handle the books. The time she insisted we use a joint email but changed the password 2 weeks later. The cash withdrawals. The fake girls' weekends. The quiet hostility when I brought up our retirement plan. Every detail was now ammunition. I didn't need confrontation. I needed control. And I was going to get it the same way she got my money. Quietly, efficiently, permanently. I didn't slam a single door, didn't raise my voice, didn't start demanding answers. That would have tipped my hand, and I was done playing emotional poker with people who had the cheat codes. Instead, I started planting seeds. It began over breakfast the next morning. My wife sat across from me in a faded university sweatshirt, scrolling her phone like nothing had shifted, like she hadn't siphoned 6 figures into a hidden account or conspired with our own children to abandon me on my birthday. She chewed toast, drank orange juice, smiled, told me I should take more vitamins for brain fog. I asked it casually, knife spreading butter, voice soft. "Whatever happened to Scott Weller?" The fork paused mid-air, a flicker, barely noticeable. She recovered quickly, impressive, really. "Oh, haven't heard from him in ages. Why?" "No reason, just popped into my head." I smiled and looked back at my plate. She forced a laugh. "You're getting nostalgic in your old age." I nodded. "Guess I'm just sentimental like that." That afternoon I called my brother, Tim, always conveniently busy when anything difficult came up. I asked about a tool set I supposedly loaned him years ago, a perfect excuse to chat. Mid-conversation, I dropped it in. "You still talk to that guy, Scott Weller?" There was a pause, just a breath too long. "Why?" he asked. "Just curious." He cleared his throat. "No, not really. Joanne said you guys had tension. Figured I'd steer clear." I let that hang in the air. Didn't challenge it, just filed it. Tension? We'd never had a single confrontation about Scott. In fact, she made sure I never had the opportunity. But now tension had entered the script, pre-written, delivered. I texted Ben, my oldest friend, or so I'd thought. We used to fish every August. Now he didn't even invite me to his kid's graduation. I asked if he wanted to grab a beer. He said sure. We sat on the patio at a bar we used to love. 2 drinks in, I leaned back and asked the same question, dressed differently this time. "Hey, you ever meet that Scott guy Joanne worked with?" He sipped, looked away. "Maybe once, briefly. One of her clients, right? Wasn't he the guy she went hiking with that weekend I had the flu?" Ben's smile tightened. "Man, I barely remember what I did last month. You sure it matters?" He changed the subject. Hard. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just avoidance. This was rehearsed. Each of them had an answer. Short, deflective, non-committal, like they'd all been handed the same pamphlet labeled, "If Robert asks, say this." So I took it a step further. I called my son. Jack picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just wanted to ask you something. Do you remember that consultant Mom worked with? Scott something?" A beat. He sighed. "Are we doing this again?" I kept my voice even. "Doing what?" "Mom said you were spiraling again, getting paranoid, making things up." My hand clenched, phone trembling just slightly. "I'm not making anything up, Jack." He exhaled loudly. "Can we not do this, please? You're going to make it weird again." Again. That word stuck to my ribs like spoiled meat. "Sure," I said. "No problem." Click. I didn't even try Eliza right away. But she called me later that evening. Her voice was brittle and fast, like she was already annoyed before I spoke. "Jack said you're acting weird." "Is that what he said?" She groaned. "Dad, seriously, don't start something. Mom told us you were getting obsessed again." "Obsessed with what?" She hesitated. "I don't know, just suspicious stuff. It's always drama lately." "Eliza," I said, my voice flat now. I asked about a man your mother used to work with, that's all. A long silence. Then she said it. Maybe don't ruin everything, Dad. I smiled to myself, not because it was funny, but because the mask was slipping. Not one of them had said, "Wait, who's Scott?" Not one had asked why I was curious. Not one had offered a real answer. Just trained, knee-jerk dismissals, redirects, passive gaslighting dressed up as concern. They weren't just complicit, they'd been coached. And Joanne, she hadn't just lied, she'd conditioned them, spun a narrative, crafted an alternate version of me, a fragile old man who sees shadows in the wallpaper. And they'd all bought it because it was easier than facing what she was hiding. I wasn't isolated anymore, I was awake. And Joanne had just given me the clearest gift she never meant to, confirmation. They were all playing from the same script, time to flip the ending. The attic always smelled like forgotten time, cardboard, dust, the stale scent of seasons that never made it downstairs. I hadn't been up there since we boxed up old tax documents and electronics last year. We should toss all this junk, Joanne had said back then, already halfway down the pull-down ladder. It's just clutter. But something about how quickly she'd written it off had stuck with me, like she didn't want me going through it, like some things needed to stay forgotten. That night I cracked open the access panel and pulled the chain light. The bulb flickered twice and hummed to life. It didn't take long to find it, big blue Rubbermaid bin marked Tech. I dragged it toward the hatch and popped it open like a safe. Cables, chargers, 2 ancient iPods, an old Wi-Fi router, and buried at the bottom under a tangle of USB cords and outdated headphones was a slim black iPhone with a chipped case. I recognized the sticker on the back, a faded gold moon she used to love, her old phone. I didn't get hopeful. Most phones are locked tight these days, and she was careful, meticulous, paranoid even. But when I pressed the side button, the screen lit up. No lock screen, just the home page, like it had been waiting. I sat on the attic floor, legs crossed like a child sneaking Christmas gifts, and opened the mail app. A moment later, I knew I wasn't crazy. A backup iCloud account, still logged in, full inbox, hundreds of unread emails, not junk, not spam, real things. It was like stepping into a second life, one she kept off-grid, away from our shared accounts, away from the family iMac in the kitchen, a place where she didn't need to lie because no one was looking. The inbox told a story she never would have. Subject lines jumped out like road signs. Booking confirmation, Tranquil Springs Spa Resort. Cabin reservation, Birch Hollow, 2 guests. Wine pairing weekend, RSVP confirmed, Scott and Joanne. I clicked, scanned. The cabin reservation included a PDF attachment with names, Scott Weller and Joanne P. 2 nights, Queen Suite, fireplace. The dates? The same weekend she'd said she was visiting her sister in Michigan. She even brought back souvenir fudge. I remember because she laughed and said, "It's overpriced, but it's tradition." I opened the next message, a forwarded itinerary for a couple's retreat, sent to her private account, labeled S&J Wellness Escape. She'd told me she was at a regional HR conference that weekend. Another lie. Then came the photos. Not many, she'd been careful. But old phones have a way of hoarding truth. In the recently deleted folder were dozens of blurry snaps, screenshots, receipts, and one photo that made something in my chest go cold. Father's Day, last year. She'd told me her sister was having a medical scare, something about urgent tests, needing emotional support. She'd left me home with a grilled chicken breast and a card that just said, "Love you always." The photo told a different story. Her, in a sundress I'd never seen, glass of rosé, feet up on a porch railing. Next to her, half in the frame, Scott Weller, shirtless, his hand on her knee. The timestamp? 2:12 p.m. The exact time I'd been video calling Eliza, who didn't pick up. I stared at the image for a long time, not because I couldn't believe it, I already could. I'd moved past denial days ago. What froze me was the ease, the comfort, the look on her face, not guilt, not conflict, but peace. She was home in that photo, and I was the stranger. I closed the app, set the phone down, exhaled. The fury that came wasn't hot. It didn't burn or scream. It settled, like a weighted blanket of resolve. Because now I had evidence. Hard, cold, time-stamped, mapped against lies I remembered in detail because I'd blamed myself for them. I had spent the last year thinking I was the one who forgot something, some birthday, some event, some unspoken expectation. But I hadn't forgotten. I'd just been deliberately misled, and now I had the receipts, photos, dates, reservations, all pointing to a web that wasn't new. It went back years, through holidays, birthdays, family crises. Her whole second life had been built on the assumption that I'd never dig, never look, never ask. She was right, until now. I didn't rush down the attic stairs. I didn't confront her. She was probably downstairs at that moment, watching a renovation show and Googling throw pillows. She didn't know the attic light was on. She didn't know the clock had started, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a single raised voice, because this wasn't anger anymore. It was inventory. The diner sat on the edge of town like it didn't care whether the world remembered it or not. Wood-paneled walls, vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like rusted memories. The kind of place where secrets didn't echo. They just settled into the cushions and stayed there. George was already seated when I walked in. Corner booth. Same one we used to sit in when we talked about Eliza's college plans or Jack's obsession with skateboarding. He had a manila envelope by his elbow and a look on his face I hadn't seen in years, something halfway between guilt and grief. I slid into the booth. Neither of us spoke for a moment. He finally said, "You look thinner." "Stopped eating disappointment for breakfast," I replied. He gave a short, dry chuckle, then looked down at the envelope, tapped it once like it was burning his fingertips. "I think I knew," he said, "but I didn't want to be the one to break you." "You're not," I said, voice flat. He nodded slowly. "Good." The waitress came by. We both ordered coffee, though I didn't touch mine. George took a sip like it gave him courage. "She's been lying for a long time, Rob." I didn't need confirmation. I needed motive. "Why now?" He looked up then, eyes meeting mine with something heavier than sympathy. "Because they left you sitting there," he said, "on your birthday, and because your name's still on the trust that holds their house." The words didn't land immediately. "My name?" He nodded. "You remember when Joanne's mom passed and we put the house into the family trust to shield it from estate taxes?" "Yeah," I said, the memory foggy. "I helped draft the paperwork with the estate attorney." "Well, guess what?" George said, sliding the manila envelope toward me. "She never filed the amendments. You're still the primary trustee." I blinked. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "You can confirm it with the firm. I pulled the copies myself. She tried to have me sign off as sole trustee last year, said it was for simplicity. I didn't. I had a feeling she was maneuvering." I opened the envelope. Inside were notarized documents from 4 years ago. My name, her name, George's signature as a witness. The property listed in the trust, a 5-bedroom Craftsman just outside town, renovated twice, paid off early. Market value now? Probably over $800,000. "She's been living in that house like she owns it outright," George said. "But if you wanted to revoke the grantor rights, you could, with one form." I stared at the paper, at the ink I barely remembered signing, the quiet ghost of a favor I'd done for her family without hesitation. And now, it was leverage. I set the folder aside. "She's been planning this a long time." He nodded. "She's smart, cold, but smart. She manipulated the kids." "I know. And she made sure I looked crazy before I ever asked a question." He looked ashamed. "I didn't know about that part. I wish I'd stepped in sooner." "Don't," I said. "You stepping in now is the only reason I'm not still sitting in that restaurant wondering what I did wrong." He looked like he wanted to apologize again, but I raised a hand. "I don't need sorry, George." "What do you need?" I met his eyes. "A notary." He smiled. "That I can arrange." We sat in silence for a minute. Two men who had once been family by default, now joined again by betrayal and damage control. The waitress came by to refill our mugs. George waved her off. I let mine go cold. "So what's your plan?" he asked finally. I considered that. "I'm not going to blow it up. Not yet." That's what she'd expect. Tears, rage, victimhood. "I'm going to do what she never saw coming." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm going to turn the volume down on my presence," I said, "and let the silence talk for me." George leaned back in the booth. "You're a better man than me." "No," I said, "just a man who's done being used." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old brass key. "This is for the lockbox in my study. Second drawer has all the original paperwork, trust deeds, transfer rights. You'll want them." I took the key, pocketed it without a word, and just like that, the fog started lifting, because for the first time since I'd read that group chat, since I'd scrolled those damning emails, I didn't feel like a man unraveling. I felt like a man reloading. She wanted me erased, slowly, made obsolete, quietly displaced from my own life so she could rewrite the narrative. She forgot something critical. I helped build the damn story, and now I was writing the next chapter. The thing about rage is, it's loud, obvious, predictable. It gets attention, but it also gets managed, deflected, Dismissed. That's why I didn't yell, didn't flip tables, didn't stand in the kitchen one night and throw her phone into the sink. That's what she would have expected, a pathetic meltdown, something she could point to and say, "See, he's unstable." But instead, I went silent. And while she smiled through dinners and scrolled through Pinterest boards for a kitchen renovation she'd never finish, I began the process of removing her, quietly, methodically, and with a surgeon's hand. The first call I made was to a man named Whitaker. He's not in the yellow pages. He doesn't have a website. But if you need to disappear someone from a legal document without setting off alarms, he's the guy you call. We met in a windowless office above a hardware store on 14th Street. His handshake was dry, his tone surgical. "I need to revise my will," I said. "Completely or selectively?" "Start fresh." He nodded once and slid a pen across the desk. Over the next 2 hours, we did what Joanne always assumed I'd never have the nerve to do. We rewrote every clause, every allocation, everything she thought was guaranteed to flow through her hands once I dropped dead in some hospital bed. I removed her name from everything. My power of attorney, gone. Medical proxy, gone. Life insurance beneficiary, changed to a trust in Eliza's name, with conditions. The house she lived in, technically in the family trust. But I'd already confirmed with George that my revocation rights as original grantor were still intact. We began the quitclaim transfer reversal paperwork that afternoon. Once filed, she wouldn't be a tenant. She'd be a guest, invited, tolerated, and revocable. Next, I called HR at my old firm. "I thought you were already drawing pension," the rep said. "I'm eligible for a lifetime cash out," I replied. "Are you sure? Most people don't take that unless—" "I'm sure." A week later, the balance hit a private account under my name, the one Joanne didn't know about, the one I opened 3 months after I caught her texting SW at 1:34 a.m. and pretending it was Eliza asking about soup recipes. I also made one more change, small but potent. The family trust successor trustee clause. Originally, Joanne was listed as the successor if anything happened to me or George. That changed. The new successor was a firm in Massachusetts, one I'd already spoken to, professional trustees, emotionally agnostic. They'd follow the letter of the trust, not family tiers. Meaning if Joanne ever tried to contest the house or claim equity or whine her way into a settlement, she'd be arguing with lawyers who charged by the hour and didn't drink wine with her on weekends. When it was all finished, I went home. She was in the backyard trimming basil, humming something tuneless. She looked up and smiled. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just errands." She stretched and said, "Hey, if you talk to the accountant, can you ask about moving some savings into short-term bonds?" I smiled. "I'll look into it." That night, while she streamed some true crime documentary in bed, I sat downstairs and read through every signed form. The trust, the pension withdrawal, the new will, and I felt it. Not anger, not even satisfaction. Control. She thought she'd been playing chess while I was playing checkers, but the board had flipped. Every pawn she thought she'd sacrificed was now a rook. Every file she thought was deleted was now archived. Every dollar she laundered had a breadcrumb trail. And the best part, she didn't know. She had no idea her power was already unraveling, that the house she spruced up for holiday photos was now one signature away from repossession, that the lifestyle she'd built on secrets was quietly being dismantled behind her back, form by form, clause by clause. That's the thing about quiet exits. You don't hear the footsteps until the door's already shut. And I wasn't done walking. The text was simple, clean, almost boring. "Dinner at the house. Everyone welcome. No drama." Sent to the same group chat that coordinated my abandonment like a middle school prank. The same thread where they made jokes about me crying into my wine. That little digital echo chamber of smug betrayals. I sent it on a Thursday morning. By Thursday evening, they were all in. The responses came fast, like they'd been waiting for me to fold first. "Sure, Dad. See you then. Looking forward to it. We'll bring dessert." My wife responded last. Just a thumbs up emoji, cold, casual, as if she hadn't spent the last year constructing an alternate reality around my supposed unraveling. Saturday came. I prepped the table myself, set it for 7 again like I had on my birthday. No caterers, no takeout, just a home-cooked meal, rosemary chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, grilled asparagus, their favorites. I poured wine. I lit the same candles from last year, the ones I bought but never used. The house was spotless, sterile. They started trickling in around 6. Eliza and Jack arrived together, laughing too loud at something on her phone. My brother showed up next, wearing the same cologne he's used since the 90s, acting like this was just a nice family evening. Ben, my so-called best friend, brought a bottle of Merlot and 2 tins of imported olives. For old time's sake, he said. Joanne walked in last, wearing that navy blue wrap dress she always saved for manipulation. She kissed my cheek, dry, rehearsed, and whispered, "I'm proud of you for making an effort." I just nodded. Everyone sat, chairs scooted, wine glasses clinked, polite murmurs about work and renovations and Eliza's new apartment. Jack mentioned some elective course he was taking, psychology of memory of all things. The irony practically chewed through the wallpaper. I didn't eat much, just listened, watched, waited. Once the plates were mostly empty and their comfort levels had settled into soft laughter and mild wine buzzes, I stood, quietly. No raised voice, no fork clinking, just stood. Every eye turned. "I appreciate you all coming," I said. Joanne smiled tightly. Ben raised his glass. I reached under the sideboard and pulled out a small stack of manila envelopes, 7 to be exact, labeled in neat black Sharpie. I handed them out one by one, no ceremony, just motion. They looked confused at first, curious. Then they opened them. Inside, photocopies, printed emails, transaction logs, cabin reservations. One of the spa confirmation screenshots with the S&J logo circled in red. Photos, just a few, but damning. A freeze frame of Joanne's hand resting on Scott Weller's thigh during their Father's Day getaway. A spreadsheet showing $184,762 in unaccounted investment contributions. A highlighted line on the updated trust documents, successor clause revoked, quitclaim reversal filed, her name missing from everything that once guaranteed her comfort. Silence, not the stunned, gasping kind, the sinking kind, the kind that feels like oxygen evacuating the room molecule by molecule. I let them read for a full minute. Then I spoke again, calm, level. "Your silence," I said, "was loud." No one moved. No calls, no texts, not even a fake excuse, just nothing. Like I wasn't worth even the performance of care. Joanne opened her mouth. I held up a hand. "To be clear," I continued, "I'm not asking for apologies. I don't want explanations. This isn't about closure. It's documentation." My son stared at the bank logs like they were written in Greek. Eliza's face had gone pale. My brother kept blinking like he thought maybe the page would change if he stared hard enough. Ben looked down, couldn't even meet my eyes. Joanne? She was the only one still trying to hold the pose, her jaw tight, her eyes scanning, calculating. I turned to her last. "You said once that I didn't see the big picture." I stepped back from the table. Turns out I was the only one looking. No one spoke, not one word. The air in the room went arctic. You could hear the baseboard heater creak behind the silence. The wine sat untouched. Dessert remained boxed in sweating condensation. I hadn't even dropped the final hammer yet, but they knew. This wasn't a confrontation. This was a notice. A very polite, well-documented notice. Your time is up. The chair at the head of the table, the one I used to sit in, the one where my father once carved a notch with a pocket knife during Thanksgiving, stayed empty. I stood instead. The room was still silent, just as I'd left it after handing out those manila envelopes. They hadn't moved. Not one fork lifted, not one glass raised. The faces in front of me looked like portraits, painted with shock, painted with shame. But none of them looked surprised enough. Maybe because, deep down, they knew this dinner wasn't forgiveness. It was judgment in linen napkins. I cleared my throat. "I set that table for 7, I said, "because I believed I had 7 people who loved me." Joanne's gaze flicked up. The performance mask cracked, just slightly. I believed foolishly that blood and years and sacrifice meant something more than convenience. I looked directly at her. "You left me alone, on purpose, strategically. You built a narrative around my decline that suited your future better than I did." Her lips parted, ready to object, spin, plead. I didn't let her. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just made decisions. To Tim, my brother, my childhood echo, the man who once punched a bully for me in 7th grade, I said, "You covered for her. You heard the lies and thought silence was loyalty." His eyes dropped to his plate. He didn't argue. To Ben, my best friend who toasted my wedding, who held my hand in the ER when Eliza was born, I said, you knew, and you picked comfort over decency." He swallowed hard but said nothing. Then I looked to my kids. Jack looked like he was about to cry. Eliza looked like she already had. "You didn't even text." Eliza opened her mouth. "Dad, we thought—" "No, I cut her off, voice level. You didn't think. You absorbed. You parroted. You signed off on erasing me because it was easier than asking questions. No yelling, no dramatics, just the words, delivered clean. I wanted them to sting the way disinfectant stings a raw wound. I stepped back from the table. The light above cast my shadow across the centerpiece, a cheap bouquet Joanne picked up from the grocery store an hour before they arrived. This house isn't mine anymore, I said, gesturing around. The title will reflect that next week. Your mother will receive a notice from the trustee. Joanne blinked. You're giving it to them? I smiled without warmth. No, just vacating it. The trust will decide what's equitable. The assets are frozen. The equity line is canceled. The accounts are closed. The safety nets you thought were still there aren't. Jack stood. Dad, don't. Sit, I said. He did. Then I reached into my pocket and placed one last envelope on the table. Plain white, no name. I didn't need to label it. It wasn't meant for any of them, specifically. It was for all of them. I'll leave you with this, I said. A letter. You'll each get your copy tomorrow. Same sentence. I turned toward the hallway, toward the door, toward silence. Behind me I heard someone whisper my name. I didn't turn back, not out of defiance, but because there was nothing left to face. No one at that table existed in the shape I'd known them. They were masks now, faded paint over people I used to believe in. The front door clicked shut behind me. I walked out into a cool night, wind gently shaking the porch light. I didn't take a bag. I didn't look back through the windows. I didn't need to. That house was a crime scene, and I'd already filed the report. The next day, the courier delivered 7 letters, one to Joanne, one each to Eliza and Jack, one to Ben, one to Tim, one copy left sealed and filed in the trustee's vault, one in my own safe deposit box. Each letter bore a single sentence. You'll never again sit at a table you refuse to show up to. That was the only closure I offered. Not revenge, not rage, just consequences and silence.